Hey everyone. One of the questions that I get a lot is really about the differences between nominal and ordinal data, qualitative and quantitative data, discrete and continuous, as well as the ratio and interval data. So I'm going to try and show a couple of different examples, and it gets really tricky when you're talking about qualitative data because of the way we many times ask these questions. For example, I have a Google form here that I'm going to, and I'll share this with you. It has some of the examples in here. But here are some examples of qualitative data. It's really qualitative because it's not representing a number. When someone asks you, how do you feel today? You don't say 4. All right, you say, I feel good, I feel okay, I'm feeling great. Those are qualities. Right? When you ask what your favorite color is, the answer isn't 7. When someone asks if you're male or female, you don't say 0 or 1. But a lot of times, because of the ways that computers think, we take data, we end up codifying it or putting numerical values attached to it. And those values are usually just to identify things. For example, many times when you're taking a survey, when it says, how do you feel today, you answer on a scale, for example, 1 to 5. That doesn't mean that this is numerical data. It really means I'm sad, happy, somewhat happy, or neutral. Okay? If I had asked that same question the exact same way, happy, somewhat sad, or sad, but didn't put any numbers on there, people would immediately say, yes, that's qualitative. Right? That's both qualitative data. The idea of qualitative data is then, is it going to be nominal or ordinal? Can you put this in any kind of order or hierarchy? I would argue that yes, you can decide what order you want to put sad, somewhat happy, or happy in. So this is ordinal. Both of these are ordinal data that describes whether or not, describes a quality, like how happy you are. On the flip side, if I ask a question like, what is your favorite color? And maybe I give you 5 or so choices, and I basically assign each choice a number. In this case, what is your favorite color? Red or blue? I've defined red to be 1 and blue to be 2. That is nominal data. There's no way for me to put in order which one is the better answer, like red or blue or green or white. That it's just telling you, it's identifying and saying these people picked red, these people picked blue. So that is qualitative data, that is nominal. You could say the same thing about questions about gender. And we could say, I could assign values, like female is 0, male is 1, prefer not to say is 2, other is 3. Right? That does not put any kind of hierarchy or ordering in there. So this is, again, qualitative data that is nominal in nature. Now, going on to the next side, we'll really talk about quantitative data. All right, this is any type of data that is going to be represented by a number. And these things should be values that mean something, right? If I ask you how many times you won last season, that answer is a value. Now, once you start talking about values, we say it's either continuous, it can be any number within a range, or it's going to be discrete. We also talk about the difference between ratio or proportional data versus interval data. Ratios really depend on 0 meaning something and not just being kind of an arbitrary mark. And I'll show you an example. It's probably one of the most common examples. But if I ask how tall you are, that is quantitative data because you're going to give me a result that is a quantity. It's a number. It's also continuous because you could say I'm 5'8". I'm 5'8 and a half. I'm 5'8 and a quarter. 5'8 and a 16th or a 32nd or a 64th. You know, depending on the instrument, we can constantly be more accurate. So this is continuous data. And when we're talking about height, the 0 means something. If you had a height of 0, it means you have no height whatsoever, like you are 0 inches. So saying that someone who is 4 feet tall is twice as tall as someone who's 2 feet tall makes sense. Okay. On the flip side, if I ask how hot it is outside, when you say in Fahrenheit, like, oh, it's 75 degrees outside, right? That does not mean it is twice as hot as when it is 37.5. Or if it's 80 degrees, it's not twice as hot as 40 degrees. That's not how it works. And that's because 0 degrees on any of those scales is just kind of an arbitrary place that they decided here's where 0 degrees is. And so those of you into science a little bit more might understand that and call me out on it. But, we talk about energy and measuring kinetic energy. 80 degrees doesn't have twice as much energy as 40 degrees. So that is an arbitrary 0. So this is still continuous data, right? Because of the instrument, you could say it's 30 degrees or 30.5 degrees or 30.25, 30.1/8. You could get tinier and tinier with that based on the tool you use to measure. It's continuous, but it is ratio data, whereas the one before was continuous interval data, right? The 0 is arbitrary. 10 degrees difference, 80 degrees is 40 degrees warmer than 40 degrees, but not necessarily makes sense to say twice as hot. If I ask you how many days there are this month, that is going to be discrete data. There's really only 4 possible answers for that. There's either 28 or 29 for February, 30 or 31. There's 4 possible choices. It's countable. You don't answer saying 28.5 days this month. So there's only 4 answers, which means this is still quantitative data that is discrete. And even though it would be impossible for me to say there's 0 days, 0 is not arbitrary, right? So if you had some measurement where you were asking how many days and somebody said, oh, there's 30 days this month and there's 15 days last month, there truly would be twice as many days. It's never going to work out that way, but it is a ratio. 0 does mean something. Same idea with how long did it take you to finish your homework. It's continuous. It's time. You could measure it out and kind of divide it up as many times as you want. 30 minutes is twice as long as 15. So this is quantitative data that is continuous because you can get more and more accurate, this infinite number of answers, and it is ratio because 0 means something. Okay, here's another one that is kind of an oddball. If someone asks how many times have you been married, you could go out on a limb and argue that this is continuous data because you could answer any number of times between 0 and an infinite number. But I don't think you're ever going to say I was married 1/2 time, right? So it's not truly continuous because it's discrete in the fact that it's either 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 and so on, right? That's discrete. It's countable. And realistically, it wouldn't go on to infinity, right? You'd run out of time eventually there. So it's a discrete, countable answer. But it is also ratio data because being married 10 times means you were married twice as many times as someone who was 5. Now, the one that I've really struggled with is figuring out an example for discrete data that's countable like this, that is also interval and not ratio. So I'll continue to think about that, but that one's been the tough one. But in general, when you are looking at these things, you either decide, is this a quality or a quantity? Quality data only has ordinal and nominal that we're interested in. They either put it in order or not. When you do quantitative, it is going to either have an important 0, a 0 that means something, so that you can say I have twice as much money, I'm twice as tall, it's twice as hot, doesn't make sense, right? So that's the tough part in that one. That is the difference between ratio and interval. But you also have to decide continuous or discrete. If it can be any number, all the decimals in between those numbers, that's continuous.